What does Exodus 20:10 tells us? You probably know that, but let us read the verse. Verse 9 says, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, thy maidservant, thy cattle, thy stranger, nor anything in thy gates. So, the Sabbath day that these sisters kept was according to the 10 Commandment Sabbath, the commandment that God gave to Israel. It was given to Israel, but the Sabbath was long before Israel was even a nation. In Luke 24, actually, let us go to Luke 4 and verse 16. Speaking of the custom of Jesus, if Jesus intended to change the Sabbath day, wouldn't he have done that before his death? Right? But his custom, verse 16. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. Jesus' custom, as he was brought up with his parents, was to go to the synagogue on the Sabbath. And Jesus reveals something wonderful here in this reading. This is what he says in verse 18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. And he sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captive, to recover the sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. This was something that was prophesied concerning Jesus. And he came to fulfill that mission. Jesus did not come to disrupt God's plan. God's plan is eternal. Jesus' custom was to worship on the Sabbath day, to keep the Sabbath day holy. Jesus had no intention of confusing the world by changing these things that are sanctified. Genesis tells us it is sanctified. It is holy. God said it so. Similar to how God made man and woman, this order hasn't changed. Jesus, as his custom was, he came into this world to preach this gospel. And he went to the synagogue and he preached. Jesus also taught concerning the destruction of the temple. In Matthew 24 and verse 20, Jesus, in talking to the disciples concerning, earlier in the chapter, concerning the destruction of the temple, he is saying to the disciples that they should pray that their flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Have any idea when the temple was destroyed? It was AD 70 by the Romans. And here Jesus is telling the church, telling his disciples, something that would happen in the future. He's saying to them, pray. As he told them when they showed him the beautiful temple, He said, not one stone will be left that will not be hewn down. And here Jesus is telling them, pray, however, pray that this do not come upon you in winter. Why? It would be very difficult to travel a mountain and to try to escape in the winter. Very, very difficult. Now on the Sabbath day, the Sabbath was very precious to Jesus. And he wanted to pass that on to the church. But Jesus put it on the church to pray for these things. Think Jesus had power over this? When it should happen? Of course. But he wanted the church. Put the responsibility on the church to pray, and upon Israel to pray that this problem that will come upon them, this sacred place that they worship God, that it do not happen on the Sabbath. And it happened 70 AD, about 30 plus years after Jesus ascended to heaven. You know, so if this Sabbath was changed, as we look back, who are all these people to know about a change? Who should we learn from? Those that were closest to Jesus, or those that tell us 300 years later? That's when it was instituted. That's when the change came about. It was always the 7th day of the week. 70 AD, they were praying. Jesus asked them to pray that this problem do not come upon them on the Sabbath. So as I said to you before, to understand our future, to understand where we're going, governments do it. They kept records of the past. We still judge by constitutions that build nations like this and nations like this that stand upon certain constitution for over 200 years, still stand upon it. And men are still judged by it. Leaders of this world are still judged by these constitutions, are put in place and in offices based on these constitutions. How about the constitution of our God? Why should it be annulled? You know, why should we disregard it? The constitution of our God. Why would it end with Jesus' death? How come the early disciples did not recognize the change? 70 AD, when the problem came in Jerusalem, you know, that's the time Jesus was asking them to pray about. To pray about those times.